so many like acres.
It's 6 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please have roll call, Maurice.
Mrs. Hett?
Here.
Mrs. Lee?
Here.
Mrs. Rail? Here. Mr. Crane?
Here.
Mrs. Medina? Here. Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Bembo?
Here. Thank you, Maureen. Next, we'll move on to the student representatives report. Krista?
So again, we have our new student school board representative, which is Rick Glassfield, and he will be coming with me next month. We also have our National Honor Society candidates that are being selected. Alexa Gross, Heidi Gus, and Ben Howard competed in French forensics on Saturday in Wausau. All three will be continuing to state in May in Milwaukee. Track, soccer, softball, baseball, and tennis are all starting. AP exams are all registered for. We are preparing for the Dodgeball Classic that will take place on May 15th and prom. Also, on April 26th and 27th, we have a few of our student council members competing at state, along with DECA members competing at their state that have qualified. We also had a blood drive last week, and tomorrow is Hawaiian Shirt Day, so,
Wow.
yep.
Sounds like a busy time.
Oh.
All right, thank you for your report. Next, move on to the minutes.
Okay, I would make a motion that the regular Board of Education meeting minutes of March 9th, the special Board of Education meeting open and close of March 9th, the special Board of Education meeting, the two closed session, March 18th, and the special Board of Education meeting open and close of April 6th be approved as printed.
Second.
A motion to and second to approve the regular Board of Education meeting minutes from March 9th, the special Board of Education meeting, open and closed session meeting minutes of March 9th, the two closed session meeting minutes of March 18th, and the open and closed session meeting minutes of April 6th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Those minutes are approved. Maureen, do we have any comments from citizens today?
None.
Okay, we can move on to committee reports then. John, Business Services?
Thank you, John. Business Services met on April 6th at 6 o'clock. We had no public comment, and we do have 3 consent agenda items today. First item is the 10-year capital improvement plan, and what that is that deals with Fund 46, and what we had to do is approve the ability to have that fund, and we discussed that fund before as far as that's the fund for capital improvements. And you have to start the clock and keep the money in there for 5 years. And then after the 5th year, you can use it, and then you have to use it up by the 10th year, correct?
Well, there is no...
There's no cap, so after that, we just use that up for business or capital improvements. Second item was the actual funding of that fund that we approved. And Dan said we have the $25,000 to start that fund in motion and begin the clock. And that was was that from general fund?
Yes, that's right.
General fund that we had, he had put aside for that. And then the last item was a wireless microphone purchase approval for UPAC. The biggest issue we had is that the equipment was aging, and the FCC is now selling off some bandwidth. So we had, I think he said half of our microphones were within that bandwidth. So once they make the sale, we can no longer use those microphones. So we had to order. We needed them for not only just for battery life and to get the equipment equivalent to today's standards. One of the nice things is the vendor he chose or that won the bid is also giving us $5,000 back for the old equipment. So we are getting money back for equipment that we have, where the other 2 vendors didn't make that offer. So with that, our committee, did anybody want anything held up?
No, I just have a question.
Sure.
I'm looking at the 10-year capital improvement plans. When we were at state, there were some seminars on, and some schools are using it for somehow for parking lots and whatever, and giving all this stuff, and then somebody from the state stood up and said, whoa, we're really looking at this and you better watch it. Has that been clarified?
That has not been clarified yet, and we're still waiting to hear anything.
We,
Because our interest was to use them for security measures, And at this point, I don't believe we're able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we did have that discussion, and I brought up the same thing.
Now, these funds would be able to be used for that, but not for 5 years.
Okay.
I think
But we
want-
can use these for safety.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
But
We could use them for any capital project that the board would like.
what were the ones at state where they're talking about it had to be a
They-
payback?
Yeah, they were talking about, one of the concepts is that districts have been running security projects through the program, and they've also been running maintenance projects through that, and then as well as HVAC projects. And she was saying, or what she was trying to say was that you can only use it for HVAC or projects.
Okay.
That's for performance contracting.
That was,
That's Act 32.
Oh, okay.
This is Fund 46. This is a different.
It's a different
entity.
one,
This is
but
a
the other
different
had the same time frame, did it not?
No, that was, you're able to exceed the revenue limit for that. This is within the revenue limit.
Okay.
Act 32 was that big thing we had from Honeywell, that big
Yeah.
thick
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
That's where they found the energy savings, and then you could.
Okay, I guess I
counteract
thought
that
that's what
dollars.
that one seminar was.
We could just restrict it to energy savings because we know that is permissible. I mean, DPI agrees that's permissible, but we were also interested in some other projects.
All right, thanks.
So with that, the committee recommends, and I move to approve items A, B, and C.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to approve business service items 1, 2, and 3. Could we please have a roll call on that one?
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Bembo,
Yes.
Mrs. Medina,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Cranes,
Yes.
Mrs. Het,
Yes.
Mrs. Rayon.
Yes.
Thank you, Lee. This motion's carried.
Okay, and the balance of our report was a purchases review of the CISA 5, which is our accounting, both our accounting software and also our field education for student curriculum for our virtual classes. My favorite purchase was the copy paper purchase. You had that one. And then we did get an update, thank you for the leading, of the performance contracting. Ed did put together, and you saw it in the backgrounds, he did go through all the schools and give us a background, or an up-to-date of what he thought was important, what we have to look at, and what needs to be done in our buildings. And then that's when we did discuss that performance contracting part, and we are looking at another vendor. Nexus is the other vendor. But Dan and Ed both thought we better hold off till we find out what DPI and the regulations are gonna be. Because there's several of them doing that Act 32 now, but the thought might be is if they say, no, you can't use that Act 32, they're gonna have to pay that money. Pull that out of the general fund or something, because I'm sure the state won't allow it, it's even after it's done. So we're kind of trying to throw that one to the caution of the wind right now and holding off on making those decisions until we know for sure. With that, I submit the balance of the minutes for approval.
Second.
The motion is second to approve the business service committee meeting minutes from April 6, 2015. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, minutes are approved. Thank you, John. Next, we will move on to personnel services. Sandy?
Personnel Services met last Monday, April 6th, at 6 p.m. We had no public comment. From that meeting, we have 8 consent agenda items, and they are as follows. Number 1, the committee recommends, and I move to approve the 2 support staff retirements and the 1 support staff early retirement. Secondly, the committee recommends, and I move to approve the 2 professional staff resignations and the 1 support staff resignation. And then we had 6 policy reviews, and these were all for second readings. Number consent agenda 3, the committee recommends, and I move to approve policy 345.51, graduation requirements as of 2005 for second reading. That should be 2015, should it not?
No, that is the actual name of the policy.
It is
Yeah.
2005?
It's being deleted.
Oh, okay,
They all got combined.
all right. Fourth, the committee recommends, and I move to approve policy 345.5, graduation requirements for second reading. Fifth, the committee recommends, and I move to approve policy 345.51, exhibit graduation requirement flow chart for second reading. Sixth, the committee recommends, and I move to approve policy 420, school admissions for second reading. 7th, the committee recommends and I move to approve policy 343.4, course options program for second reading. And 8, the committee recommends and I move to approve policy 412, full-time students for second reading. Anybody want something held out?
I'll second that then.
Okay, motion is second to approve PS1 through PS8. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
On policy 345.52, early graduation, and policy 420, rule guidelines for admission of transfer students, there were some questions that came up at the committee level. They're going to come back with some of the answers to those questions, so those were tabled as of last Monday. Updates and reviews, we talked a little about substitute teacher compensation. It's becoming very difficult to find enough substitute teachers at times. The pool is getting smaller. Sometimes we're very short. They looked at possible compensation information and possible options for future adjustments. We're going to be getting more information about what other school districts are paying their substitute teachers because we are in competition with other districts. So that'll be coming back to personnel services at a future meeting. And lastly, we looked at supplemental pay for professional staff employees. We discussed current and potential new practices with the use of supplemental pay for our professional staff employees. This included the use of supplemental pay to hire and retain employees in a variety of positions like high need or hard to fill areas. The potential use of supplemental pay as a means to attract voluntary transfer of our existing employees into the high need or hard to fill positions was also discussed. The committee expressed support to have the administration continue their current practice of exercising the use of supplemental pay with professional staff on a case-by-case basis. We're having terrific times, especially in like tech ed. There aren't many out there, and we're doing a lot to maintain some of our people. Yeah.
The substitute teacher compensation, could you also see, is Stevens Point still using that third-party vendor?
Yes, they are. In fact, I got a phone call from them just today because they're interested in working with Wisconsin Rapids as well. It's called Teachers on Call.
Right, and I was just wondering how many districts are using, if we could find out how many districts are actually using them also.
Merrill added them this year that I'm aware of offhand. Those are the only two that I'm familiar with offhand
Okay.
without learning more.
But I remember we were discussing that a couple of,
Yeah.
2 conventions ago when we walked by and they gave us a pitch. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
I continue to be frustrated with the constraints that we have with our staff, with whatever you call it, negotiating, you can't do that, you can't do this. I'm looking for something better, but I can't find it, and I'm frustrated.
The biggest problem with that is what's called the law. Right, Tim?
The constraints are difficult.
I think those are things
And
we can
they're,
share next week with our legislators when we have the consortium meeting. Guess we can't drive that point home often enough or loud enough. Maybe we
Right.
keep talking, they'll start listening.
As a district that has a history of working with people, it's difficult to not be able to do that anymore.
Didn't we talk about, with our substitute teachers, our retired teachers, even though they had a lifetime license, they must get a substitute teacher license? And some of our retired teachers going, you know what, I'm just not gonna do that. So we're losing that pool of people, and this might be something we could bring up too, if you've had a lifetime license for teaching, and if you're gonna substitute, you shouldn't have to get another license. There should some way, and I know personally, when I talked to one, and that was why they weren't gonna be substituting for us anymore. They just decided they weren't gonna pay for that license. So, any others? So with that, I move that the minutes be approved as printed.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion is second, the meeting minutes from Personnel Services Committee of April 6, 2015 be approved as printed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Report's approved. Thank you, Sandy. Next, we'll move on to Ed Services. Ann?
Thanks, John. Ed Services met last Monday, April 6th as well. Our meeting started at 6:43 p.m. There was no public comment. We started with actionable items. We have 3 of those. And the first one was a 21st Century Community Learning Center grant. And Kathy Stebbins Hintz, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, explained that Mead Elementary Charter School is again applying for the renewal of the DPI 21st Century Community Learning Center grant for 2015-16 school year. This grant funds the before and after school Club Mead program and will be used for staffing purposes. And that we voted to approve the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant request in the amount of $50,000. Our second one was about United Way of Inner Wisconsin grant for before and after school Club Mead. Mead Elementary Charter School is requesting a $62,000 grant from the United Way to fund the before and after school Club Mead program. Grant funds will be used for staffing purposes. The request is to close the gap in funding due to the reduction of both Community Learning Center and district funds. The third one was about parent opt-out request from the Wisconsin Student Assessment System. And Kathy explained that when a parent or a guardian requests their students be excused from participating in the Wisconsin State Assessment System, this request must be honored in grades 4, 8, and 9 through 11 per Wisconsin Stats 118.30 2B3. Current district practice is to honor parent opt-out requests at any grade level when submitted in writing to the building principal and forwarded to the district assessment coordinator. And so, does anyone want any of those three held out? Well, with that, the committee recommends and I move adoption of ES1, ES2, and ES3.
I'll second that.
Motion is second to approve ES 1, 2, and 3. Maureen, could they have roll call on that, please?
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Crings?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Thank you, Maureen. Those motions are approved.
I'd just like to add on that ES3, we also had a discussion, and I'm not sure if everybody realizes that when a parent requests to opt out, and it comes to the fact that we have to allow them to opt out by state law, the state in their infinite wisdom counts that as a 0 towards our testing. So because that student opted out and they created a law, they're still penalizing public schools on the report card by giving them a 0 for that student because they opted out of the test. Just wanted to know that that's something we should bring up again next week
Yeah,
because
I
that's
was thinking
completely
about
wrong.
that too, and that's what I was
If
wondering.
you're gonna pass a law to say that it's okay for the parent to opt out, you can't turn around and penalize somebody, the school districts, for that opt out because you allowed them by law to do it.
Do we have a list of items that we hope to discuss next? Every time we say something, it's like, we gotta bring that up next week, we gotta bring that up next week. Somebody kinda,
I've got it on my list.
do you have it?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been writing all this down, but
I've
it's
been
like
too.
every time we always say, we should talk about that, we should talk about that, and we need to.
Yeah, I think
prepare
if
it.
there's anything to bring forward, maybe for...
I could put it in the board packet this week.
Sure.
When I put the agenda in there.
Do you want me to send you what I have?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be good, and
All right,
just
thank
so
you.
you're prepared for that.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Got like 10 things.
We went on to updates and we had the results of the WSAS. The Wisconsin Senate passed Senate Bill 67, the so-called holiday or pause bill, which would place a one-year hold on school report cards and delay for 1 year the use of assessment results in educator effectiveness. A similar bill, Assembly Bill 78, has not yet been voted on by the Assembly. Per an email from the Department of Public Instruction dated March 24th, 2015, school report cards will be issued for the 2014-15 school year. This may change in the coming weeks as the Wisconsin legislature continues to debate issues relating to school accountability. Then we heard about educator effectiveness, and Kathy Stebbins Hintz introduced the educator effectiveness coaches, Tina Miller, Nick Sidorowitz, Melanie Kozlowski, and Kara Christie. The coaches then presented a PowerPoint to the board reviewing what the coaches and staff have been doing since the beginning of the 2014-15 school year. It was noted that Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools is recognized in Wisconsin for the favorable work being done with this evaluation process. Board members thank the coaches for their work.
I just want to make a comment on that point too, because I just want the public to know that with all the doom and gloom in public education, if you come to our Ed Service Committee meetings monthly, the first Monday of the month, our staff never ceases to amaze us, and they do a wonderful job, and I just want to thank them personally and let the community know that.
Thank you, Mary, because that's exactly true. Okay, with that, the committee recommends and I move to accept the remainder of the Educational Services Committee meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to approve the Educational Service Committee meeting minutes of April 6, 2015. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ann. Next, we move into agenda referrals, information requests. Do you have anything? Okay, move on to our legislative agenda. Mary, do you have anything?
I have a couple of things on the WASB website. They were just telling us that budget listening sessions are still going on, so there's not much new there. They're just listening to what the voters and the public has to say. With the school referendum on ballot, there were 74 referendum questions on the ballot in 56 school districts statewide. 39 of those questions were for debt issuance, with 23 passing. 33 questions were for exceeding the revenue limit, non-recurring, with 25 passing. And there were 2 questions for exceeding the revenue cap, recurring, and those passed. So that was good news for those that passed. The only other thing on the website was a little more about the school start date legislation, and a representative from Mequon introduced Assembly Bill 144, which would allow some schools to start before September 1st. Only schools that have more than 20% participation in advanced placement exams would be allowed an exemption from the September 1st start date. He estimates that equates to about 32 districts. The September 1st start date, as we all know, was implemented with the support of the state tourism industry, which has long argued that starting school in August hurts their bottom line on Labor Day weekend. They will likely lead the opposition to this bill as well. And also, and probably most of you have heard, the GOP leader announced that he wants to restore education cuts, and I'll just read that for those who haven't. Wisconsin Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald said Friday that his fellow Republican senators want to restore much or all of the $127 million that Governor Scott Walker has proposed cutting from public schools in the first year of his budget plan. Speaking at Marquette Law School, the Juneau Republican said the precise amount will depend on updated revenue projections that will be issued in the next few weeks. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported that Fitzgerald was optimistic that the new revenue limits will be higher than current estimates. If there's enough revenue, I think there's a real commitment to do that, Fitzgerald told reporters afterward. There is definitely a commitment to take care of K-12 education. Fitzgerald also said GOP senators want to increase K-12 per pupil spending in the second year of the budget, but declined to specify how much because of uncertainty about the upcoming revenue estimates. While Republicans control the Senate and Assembly, they've differed at times with the GOP governor on spending priorities. Restoring the K-12 cuts may mean there would be less money available to prevent some of the $300 million in reductions Walker is seeking from the University of Wisconsin system over the next 2 years. Fitzgerald was more guarded about whether lawmakers would restore any funding to the UW system. He said they've always had a love-hate relationship with the system and the independent board of regents that govern it. So I guess we'll see.
The only other thing I can add is that I did see right before I came in, and I didn't write down the exact dates, but Krug, Vandermeer, and one other one are having listening sessions this week. I believe it's the 16th at McMillan Library. And then I think they're doing something in either Vesper or Albandale this week also. So you can see it on Krug's site. I'm sure it's there, but I'm not sure what it's going to do. And then the other item is that we did get an article, and I didn't read it completely, from in our background, that about the Freedom from Religion group, and I've always wondered where their position was on this voucher schools and using public dollars for basically religious schools. And it was kind of a weird position from what I read about that. They were kind of urging us, but you know, all the action they took over about that nativity seat down by the river and took the city to court and all of this. I can't believe there's no more uproar about what they're doing with the voucher schools and using it, private money for, or public money for private education like that, especially religious education. So I'm gonna take time to read that, but I think that's one of the other things we need to bring up. That's on my list for the consortiums.
I know we've only got 2 hours.
Yeah.
When does the budget get finalized?
June.
October?
Yeah, it's in June, I'm not sure, I think so.
It's just interesting, you know, we look at our neighbors, to our neighbor to the west, Minnesota, you know, and it's doing great guns. They had a $2 billion surplus, and their governor, a Democrat, is really trying to put a lot of that money into education.
Yeah. Yes.
And we're just the opposite here.
Well, and then we're not as bad off as some states. I saw 2 articles from Kansas that there's 3 different school districts closing a month and a half early because they're out of money. So those kids are just closing the doors. They don't have the money and they're just at the state. So those kids will be done in school. So what is that message for, I mean, education nationwide?
Yeah, you know, our future doctors that are going to be taking care of us, you know.
All right, well, thank you for that. Next, we can move on to the bills.
All right, I would make a motion that the receipts be noted as printed and the bills be paid as printed.
Second.
Okay, motion is second that the receipts be noted and the bills be paid as printed. Could you please have roll call, me?
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayle?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Crane?
Yes. Thank you, Maureen. We'll move into new business. Item A, possible action on employee appointments, resignations, and retirement requests. It looks like we have.
Yes, we did receive one request in the last week. I handed a sheet around prior to the start of the meeting that we have a resignation request from Jennifer Gaska. She's been a special education teacher at Fink Academy in Rudolph. She was a first-year teacher for us in the district, but has submitted a resignation effective for the end of the school year.
I move to accept that resignation.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to accept the resignation request of Jennifer Gaska effective at the beginning of the school year. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item B, discussion and action to accept Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development Fast Forward Grant.
This grant was awarded in the amount of $33,555. It's called the Wisconsin Fast Forward Blueprint for Prosperity High School Pupil Workforce Training Grant, or good news. And the goal of the grant is to provide 12 additional highly skilled youth apprenticeship opportunities for our kids, and the money will go toward training for the teachers, particularly in the Project Lead the Way area, as well as a coordinator to coordinate the number of apprenticeships we have growing.
Make a motion to recommend for the approval of the Wisconsin Fast Forward Blueprint for the Prosperity High School Pupil Workforce Training Grant in the amount of $33,555.
Second.
Okay, what was that one there? So get the name. Motion is second to
That's so
approve
stated.
the Fast Forward Blueprint for Prosperity High School Pupil Workforce Training Grant in the amount of $33,555. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next, information presenting on presentation on ALICE training. Ryan? you gonna
Yeah,
take that off?
we have Officer Casey Borkard, one of our school resource officers in the district from the Wisconsin Rapids Police Department. Casey, if you wouldn't mind coming forward, she also has, I think the microphone up front here, she has a colleague from Portage County along with her to speak about ALICE training.
Hi guys, good evening. We wanted to come and just talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the area of law enforcement and best practice for not only school crisis response, but it's also spreading to areas of healthcare facilities, churches, public places. As we know in the media, these types of mass shootings are not just occurring at our schools, but really lots of public places that are highly populated. Over the last couple of years, as law enforcement officers, we've really seen a lot of different response option type models that are gaining a lot of momentum, and they've been around for quite a while, but in the Midwest, we aren't always the first ones to hear about it or the first ones to do anything about it. So as school resource officers in Wood County, myself and other agencies have been talking about our experiences within the school districts where we work, what type of crisis response drills or plans we have, what we've really been working on, kind of comparing and contrasting what we're doing and coming up with, you know, where do we go from here, how do we advance and how do we improve and make things better. And while we were having some conversations, we were aware of some action that Portage County has been taking, so I actually invited Portage County Deputy Megan Nowinski to come. She's a safety officer for Portage County, and she has been through a training called ALICE. This is a direction that the Wisconsin Rapids Police Department is endorsing this model, and we're going to be training our officers in this model so that we can go out, not just school-wide, but community-wide, and train people on different response models to take action should, heaven forbid, anything horrible happen. And I asked her to come because she has the training in the background already. She's just going to give a brief introduction and overview of what ALICE is, and then answer any questions that you might have, and I'll hang around if you have any specific questions for me.
Could you just tell us what Alice means?
Sure, I'll have her go into it. It's kind of a phased process. She's
Okay.
got a really good explanation of it. I don't want to botch it.
Okay, so now I can't fail, so I have notes. ALICE actually stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. A little over a year ago, our department started looking at, like Casey had said, there's multiple models out there, and the basic concept was called Run, Hide, Fight. The FBI has it on their website. And we were trying to find a program that fit what we wanted to put into our schools. Our three agencies in Portage County, so Portage County Sheriff's Office, Plover Police Department, and Stevens Point Police Department got together as law enforcement and said, what program do we endorse and what do we want to look into? And ALICE had been presented at the Sheriff's Conference, and our sheriff at the time said, that's the training I would like you to go to, come back, let us know if it's something that's worthwhile, and we'll go from there. I went to it just like any other training, whatever it's training, I wasn't that excited. First day, it was at Kettle Moraine School District. Kettle Moraine apparently has a lot of money, and they had a lot of people at this training. I was shocked because I don't know that we could ever do a training like that in Stevens Point and have that many people there. But they had a lot of teachers there. I could sense, and a lot of them said they weren't really into this idea of anything but lockdown. Some teachers raised their hand and said, we're not cops, it's not our job, that's not what we signed up for. They gave a very good presentation for the first day, and it's basically describing a lot of different scenarios that have happened in our schools in our country over the last couple decades. Specifically Columbine, this was pre-lockdown. This is not how we as officers were trained, even how to respond. They weren't doing that yet. In particular, and 700 kids evacuated without being told to do so. Because our human responses are fight, flee, or freeze. And so their natural response, half of them saved their lives by running from that school that day. Unfortunately, from that, we took it and we started promoting lockdown, which is freeze. And so right now, that's what we have. But we've looked at a bunch of different school shootings in the recent years, and specifically Virginia Tech is one of them, where classrooms did different things, and the ones where they were allowed to evacuate saved lives. The kids that froze, unfortunately everybody in that classroom died that day. So what they did was they wanted to incorporate a bunch of different options. It's not a step-by-step model, it's options. And those options can be used and tweaked in different schools depending on what kind of school you have. I went out, I have 5 school districts in my county, so I had to go to each school district. Actually, you are one of my school districts. I have Grant School in Kellner, and so they're my weird school. They're weird because our response to them, we most likely would be the third agency that would get there just because of their location. Grand Rapids would be the closest. Most likely Wood County Sheriff's Department would be closest unless we have somebody down in that area. We've tried to coordinate a bunch of different things for Grant School. So I had to go to those other 4 districts and present Alice to them. When I went to the training, the second day was all scenario-based. And the first scenario that they did was they had us go into a room and do what we do now. And we locked down, and they had an active shooter come in, and he shot all of us. And I think that's when everybody woke up and said, we need to do something more than just lock down. And so Alice in particular, Alert is giving the teachers more of an option to say when they see something suspicious in their schools. Kettle Moraine in particular brought up a situation where a kid had a bee sting, went into anaphylactic shock. They had to go through a whole phone tree before anybody called 911. They don't give their teachers the option to call 911 because they're afraid they're going to bother us. And so one of the points that they're pushing is when you see something suspicious, you tell somebody. And if that means that it's that suspicious and you know, call 911 from your room. No need to call the principal's office and then find out if we should. We're giving people more authority to do so. The lockdown is still there. It's still part of Alice. But in lockdown, they teach barricading. And so very easily can you take this room in particular and barricade ourselves in. It makes it a lot harder for an active shooter to make it into that classroom. The inform part, again, is informing the rest of the school what's going on. They actually talk about schools that have cameras, being able to put a person who's locked down in a room with the camera and the system that would, the PA system that would go out over the school and basically say where that person is in the school, which gives everybody else in the other part of the school an option to evacuate. Countermeasures are for situations where if the active shooting takes place in a part of the building where you cannot lock down. Columbine had an active shooter in their library. They had it in their cafeteria. There is no opportunity for lockdown for those kids who are in that area at the time. So they teach countermeasures, ways to defend yourself, ways to distract and run, and then there's the evacuation portion. And that speaks for itself, and that's the sticking point that most of my schools got hung up on because we are about accountability. How do we account for multiple classrooms evacuating all at the same time with no place to go? And the way that we address that is that's practiced. It may not be practiced in an actual school lockdown drill, but it would be practiced with staff, and we would expect staff in our schools to come up with their own rally points depending on which exit they are using at that time, and we practice that with our staff after this is implemented. So where we're at with this is we are implementing it next school year. We are set up for training August 3rd and 4th. I have a commitment from all of my school districts, except for you guys, to get staff from each school building in Portage County. So we'll have 60 plus at our training August 3rd and 4th. And then those people will be train the trainers, just like me. They can go back to their schools. They can implement the training in a 2-hour in-service for the entire staff at each of their schools. And our law enforcement is committed to having one law enforcement person at each school for that in-service, just to answer questions or work through any issues that each school might have. And like I said, it's geared towards giving you an option for different scenarios. Not every school is going to be able to react the same way. Some of my schools, there's no option for evacuation in some of my classrooms. They're in the middle of the school, there's no windows, they're smack dab in the middle of a bunch of hallways. And so we have to adjust with that, but that brings up the conversation with each school on how can we adjust if something like this happened in that school. So hopefully that overview kind of gives you an idea of what it stands for. If you have any questions about how we're implementing it or any questions about the actual program.
The bravery or someone actually goes after the shooter or whatever, usually are staff people. Are you encouraging students to do the bravery or?
No, and in fact, the staff is who we are training. And the statistics that they give out, our response as law enforcement, and this is average across the nation, is 5 to 6 minutes. Most of these shootings are over before that. So I think there's a false sense of hope that law enforcement's going to show up and stop these incidences. It's not. It's going to be our staff in our schools. And they give many examples in this training of the staff across our country who have either lost their lives or they were brave and they were able to stop the shooter at that time and saved many lives. So we aren't encouraging students to do that. We are giving staff the power to lock down, barricade, and the counterpart, if the staff tells their kids, because they have a classroom full of seniors, hey, grab something heavy, be prepared if they come in, we are not going down, we are gonna fight. You're not gonna do that with a class full of kindergartners. You're gonna do what it takes to keep them safe. So we adjust, we talk to our staff and give staff a little bit more power to make that decision.
What responsibility, liability with court cases if staff people do it wrong or something?
There is no wrong way to implement Alice, it's just an option. It's one of the reasons why we picked a program. We could have easily just said, here's an idea, we could just go out and say this is what we want to say to people, but the training behind Alice gives people an actual day's worth of scenarios to practice, but there's no wrong way. And we are, no matter what happens in any school, if this happens, somebody's going to get sued. That's just the way our country works. But we can't hold teachers liable for trying to save lives and doing the best that they knew how to do in that situation. And even in a lockdown situation, that's what we're telling them to do. So then you're going to have parents who are saying, why didn't you have them exit out the window? If there was a doorway right there, why don't we have them leave out that doorway when the shooter is on the opposite side of school? So we face liability issues no matter which way you go.
What about cell phone use? What are you encouraging there?
Well, we are going to be flooded with 911 calls if this ever happens. Worse than, I mean, I've heard the calls from Columbine, and that was how many years ago? 90, I don't know, the year 99?
15, 16
So there was multiple calls coming in from that school. We will be inundated with cell phone calls, and we're okay with that. The more information that we get about what we're seeing, and we have to keep in mind any call we get is not always good information, but the more calls we get, the better shot we have figured
There
out.
isn't a way to call somebody and say, what should we do, is there?
What's that?
You couldn't call
In the middle of a
Sheriff's
situation?
Department and say, what do you think we should do?
Our dispatchers would give you direction. Our entire staff will eventually be trained on this. So even our dispatchers, so that they know that this is the response that will happen in our schools, because it's different than what we train right now. Our SWAT team is just now getting used to training with multiple people evacuating. We aren't used to that. We train that everybody's going to be hiding under a desk and we'll just be able to go tell them it's okay and now you can leave. We're not prepared for hundreds of people coming out at a time, and that we'll be faced with some challenges as well.
It's not a question necessarily for you, but how far along is Wisconsin Rapids Police Department with this, and is Wood County working with it too, or no?
Originally, the intent was that we would lead a similar charge, kind of what Portage County is doing, and get the whole county on board, because it just makes sense, because Grant is a dangler out in Portage County, and then we have the city schools, of course, which is covered by Wisconsin Rapids Police Department. Then we have Think and VCA, which is covered by Wood County, you know, and if Wood County is doing one thing there, they have Auburndale as well, and then Pittsville. So, you know, we did have those discussions, and they've been healthy discussions because there are several different response models that really have the basic guiding principles that are the same. It's response options. But right now we do have tentative commitment from Wood County to send a couple officers, Nakusa, who Megan had talked to last week. You know, so my intent, I think we kind of just took the lead in Rapids here to say we're a big district and we're going to try to push this forward. And, you know, to speak to Mr. Davis's question a little bit about liability, that's something that myself and Dave Bailey, the high school liaison officer, have been talking a lot at the administrative meetings to just say, you know, we know that there's more out there than lockdown, and if something bad happens, there's always going to be somebody that's going to sue, always. I think what's going to make me lose sleep is if we knew that there was something more we could be training people on and we didn't do it. So we've been doing some exercises, some tabletop things, you know, because we understand time and money are not something that any school district has excess of. So we've been trying to do what we can, and I think we've been building more response options and more confidence within that administrative team that they're then delegating back down to their staff. So I think we're kind of prepping for this
we're hoping that we're gonna get countywide uniformity, that we will all train as well. I have high hopes for training before the 15-16 school year, so that we can all be on board with this. And I think it would set a really good tone for the staff too, because overall what I've seen with our tabletop exercises and the conversations that I've had at the different schools this year is that teachers want direction, and I think they want permission to make a decision. And I've been telling them, you are the incident commander of your classroom, and there's no way that I can come around and tell everybody what to do, or your principal is gonna come around and tell everybody what to do. And we just need to empower them that make the best choice, because they want their kids to be healthy and happy, so you're gonna make the best choice you can. But if you have limited background or information to do that, we're not really setting you up for success. We're not giving you any tools for your toolbox. So I went a little off, but that's because when Megan was talking, I was thinking of a few points that I wanted to make as well, that hopefully when you leave here, it'll resonate as well. And so our goal is to get a huge thumbs up from all the law enforcement agencies and all the school districts in Wood County to move forward.
Then to follow up on that, I would think maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if we're looking at doing this, if they're gonna have that training, maybe to see if there's a few administrators and or teachers that might go to that training.
When I brought it up as an administrative team, I think the direction that Colleen Dickman had talked about going was to have administrative staff and some sort of support staff from each school, like the secretary, because whether they want to admit it or not, they're just as much a boss of that building. They do what they do, them and the janitors. So to have those two go, and then probably some folks from central office, because there's some unique circumstances here where information department and central office are attached to a school, so they have some unique challenges sending all of them. And they are all the folks that go to the Alice training have become train the trainers and can come back. And I think that's an important piece for colleagues to have somebody within their arena that have done it. It's one thing to have a law enforcement officer come, because then you're going to get that, well, I'm not a cop, I didn't go to school to be a cop, that's not what I did. But to have them as peers come back and talk to each other, I think makes perfect sense.
And that does make a lot of sense to have the secretaries go, because if our buildings are secured the way we're trying to secure them, that's the doorway somebody's gonna come in, and that would be the first line of defense.
And one of the things that I saw at Kettle Marine was the buildings and grounds crews from each of their schools came as well. They're the people that know the ins and outs of each building, know those weird inconsistencies that we aren't gonna be aware of, that they can say, this is what we're gonna see at our school, this is what we've seen in the past. And specifically administrators, we talked about buy-in. There are programs out there that are 4 hours and they're free. But it's somebody standing in front of you telling you what I just told you, and then they ship you off and expect you to just go figure it out on your own. This is a full day training classroom the first day, the second day, those same teachers that said, I didn't sign up for this, I don't want to do it, by the end were the ones attacking the shooters in the computer lab and taking them to the ground. And then you gotta pull them off of them because they're just that hyped up at the end. But and I'm not to say I'm not passionate about law enforcement, but I've been doing it for 15 years. It was a training I went to, like, no big deal. And now I was just saying before this, I should be getting paid by Alice for as many times that I've gone to present, because that's how passionate I am about how they are presenting it and the format that they use, because I think it is appropriate for our school districts in this area.
Are you limited at all with financial resources to do what you need to do?
For our county, what we have done, if you get 60 people, it's a flat fee of $12,500, which sounds like an enormous fee. But that brings per person down to $208, and that's the number I went to all my school districts, $208 per person. Stevens Point School District obviously has they're gonna have a huge check to write, but I'm not even sure that they heard Alice. They may have listened to it for about 15 minutes, and they said, when can we start this? And that's the response I'm getting, because when you just lay it out, what's happened in the past and what we're doing now, we are so far behind that we have to do something. And so, yes, that is an issue, but everybody has apparently overcome that in a short amount of time, and they're all willing to participate in our training. So initially, it was going to try to be a joint training, because I wasn't sure that I was going to get that buy-in, and we were going to try to do it together. Now I've exceeded my number, and so hopefully, with their numbers, they're going to be able to do the exact same training here probably shortly after we do ours. So prior to the school year starting.
In the follow-up, too, once the original selected staff go to the actual ALICE training, the trainer piece, that 2-day training turns into a 2-hour training in an in-service type setting. So then it's just, the cost of it is really limited by how creative you can get with your scheduling, with getting your staff together for that. So there wouldn't be, if obviously I would go and then, say Kevin Yeski came with me and Chris Weefel came with me. We come back, the 3 of us as a team can train all of East, and we're not going to charge them anything for that or get compensated for that, obviously. So there's the upfront original cost to train the people that are going to be identified as trainers, and then after that, you work it in how you can work it in and get the hours.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for listening
Thank
and
you.
having us.
Okay, next we can move on to item B, discussion and possible approval of the E-rate switching project. Yes, and that's why Phil's here.
Yes, that is why I'm here. I've got a little handout for you guys as well. Got a little PowerPoint I'm going to show you as well, hopefully you can kind of follow along. When I get my tech talk, it won't go over too far over your head.
That's the idea, we can use E-rate money on it.
Got an extra one?
Oh, that's actually a second handout.
Thank you.
Yep, that's a little bit of an explanation of the E-rate stuff. Because I don't really want to bore you with all of it.
Oh, thanks.
Switch.
Along with, there you go.
Yeah, let me show you guys one time. Let me get connected here. Okay. You probably read in some of the background that I sent out, that Maureen had sent out. And we had, originally we were gonna look at doing this project last year. And just because of all the things we were doing last year and changes, we kind of held off on it and waited to do it this year, which really helped, was a good idea, because E-rate changed a lot of the rules and regulations. So we were able to, we're going to try to utilize those changes right now. I'll go over through some of that and then what this project looks like. What this is, so I kind of did the what, how, all that kind of good stuff here as we go through this PowerPoint. What the project is replacing all the switching infrastructure at Rams, East Junior High, and LHS. That's all the blinky lights behind the closet doors that nobody really sees. It runs all the stuff that we connect to every day. We're looking at a situation that's all PoE. If you know anything about switching, it's called Power over Ethernet. And what happens is there's some electricity that flows through the actual Ethernet cables and actually powers these devices like this right here. This access point, it also powers HVAC potentially. It can power door switches. It can power some of the A-phone stuff that Ed's going to be talking about in a little bit. It can do also powers video cameras. It powers all that stuff. Right now we don't have enough PoE switches for the amount of devices we need to plug into them right now, so we're running out of spots to plug that in. So that's another reason why we want to do this. And then we're adding additional wireless access points for our students to get connected in the classroom. We're adding more devices and we need more road, so to speak. So this is the why we're doing it. Our current infrastructure at Rams, East Junior High, and LHS is about anywhere from 8 to 10 years old. And in terms of switching, that's 10 years old is approaching archaic. 10 years ago we didn't have iPads, we didn't have tablets, we didn't have the number of mobile devices that we currently have that are connecting these access points, and they're starting to fail. That's another point down there. The software code is no longer being developed, so we can't update them to take advantage of the new software standards and the quicker speeds. We need more power over Ethernet, which I just said. We need more of those ports in order to control our access points, heating, ventilating, air conditioning stuff, security pieces, the cameras, all those good things. Need more speed bandwidth. These new switches, they're all 10 gig capable. So right now our current switches are 100 meg and 1 gig capable. They'll all be 10 gig capable, which means we can put a lot more packets of information through the wire at one time. So it'll increase our bandwidth. And then we're also, this is a potential which I didn't have on there, building a road. If we decide to go a one-to-one situation, we kind of need to build the groundwork for that and laying the foundation for that. And this would be a big, huge step in that at these 3 schools. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So here's some of the E-rate changes. How they're doing this, or how E-rate changed things, is they have a priority 1 and priority 2 is what they call these different categories. I don't know your familiarity with the E-rate process, but priority 1 are services like internet connection, telephone service, WAN connections between our buildings, cellular telephone service. What else used to be in there was email hosting, web hosting, and some of those things they've eliminated and they're actually decreasing funding for. They're getting rid of the funding for that, and they're switching that funding kind of this category 2, which has always been available, but in the state of Wisconsin nobody's ever really gotten it because you had to have a certain amount of free and reduced lunch people, you had to be a certain category, and nobody in Wisconsin really ever qualified for it. So they've kind of changed it all around, and now they're changing it. It's called category 1, category 2, and category 1 is still the similar pieces that were in priority 1, with a couple of services eliminated, and in category 2 they're completely changing how you can get access to that. You don't have to have a certain number of free and reduced lunch students anymore. Everybody can apply for it. And what I just broke down here is these are our category 2 budgets, what they would be. This is over a 5-year period, so the C2 budget on the far right-hand side is what we would have over 5 years to spend on infrastructure. Wiring, cabling, access points, switches, and so forth. And it's allocated out per building. So this is, I just put down the 3 buildings that we're looking at doing an upgrade with, but we do have category 2 budgets for all of our elementary schools as well. Which we may look to do some switching upgrades there down the road, but right now we're not looking at that. We can only chew off so much at one time. And we're gonna need to utilize the 2006 referendum dollars, thank goodness, to help offset the cost of what the E-rate doesn't cover. The one thing I did want to point out is, notice where I have up there where it says not guaranteed. The E-rate dollars, that's what they're telling us they'll be, but they're not guaranteed because they have a certain amount of money allocated. And once they run out, they're out. However, from everybody I've talked to at the state level down at DPI, and one of the gentlemen there, Stuart, is very connected with E-rate at the FCC level in Washington, and he is pretty confident that all the category 2 budgets will get funded. So I'm banking on that he's right. If you want to see more detailed information, I have that secondary handout I gave you, kind of as a summarization from DPI of what the E-rate is all about. Like I said, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but you can take a look at that if you want. If you have questions, you can go hold of me. Any questions on the E-rate piece? All right, now we'll go into the actual project. We did a lot of extensive work, myself, Brian Kopinski, and Paul Peterson on network admin. Did a lot of work on researching these vendors. I mean, we've been working on this since Christmas time. Trying to get the best pricing, get the best solution, looking at the best vendors. We looked at HP, Cisco, Meraki, Juniper, and then Extreme Networks kind of entered at the last minute here. So those are the companies we looked at, and I'll give a little further explanation of what we decided here. The wireless, if you look at the next page there in your solutions, we're sticking with what we have. We have all Cisco Meraki wireless infrastructure right now. We want to keep it consistent across the board, so that's kind of what we're sticking with. We'd like to add 60 access points, 25 more at Lincoln, 20 East Junior High, and 15 more at Rams. That would almost give us an access point per classroom. Hopefully that would solve a lot of our connectivity issues. We have more devices there on these 3 buildings connecting every day. And hopefully that would solve some of those issues of having an access point in every classroom. If you look there at capital data at Heartland was kind of last minute into the game, but capital data is who we're recommending to go up. They're a little bit more expensive per unit cost, but we've utilized them in the past. We bought all of our access points from them before. We have some service engineering hours with them. They're familiar with their facilities. And in the end, it comes down to be, if after E-rate, our portion of the cost would be, you can see that difference, I think it's about $240 or something in the end. That total cost there is $46,000. Our actual cost would be about $18,637 after E-rate. E-rate pays their portion of it. Any questions there? That's kind of why I have the asterisk there, is to remind that's what I'm recommending we go with. Any questions on that? No? I think your packet might still say still waiting on the unit cost. I was still waiting as of 5 o'clock this afternoon to get that final cost from them. So I changed it here, but I think I printed off your stuff before I was up against the gun. If you look at switches, we're looking at a total of 73 switches across the 3 buildings. 68 will be edge switches. That means they're in our kind of the closets around the school building. That's what that means. And then 5 will actually be core big switches that handle a lot of data. And there'll be 2 at Lincoln, and then 3 at Lincoln, and then 1 here at East and 1 at Rams. And they'll kind of handle all the heavy lifting and make the connection back to Lincoln with all the good data on it. We'll be getting all new fiber optic connections and connectors, and then software support and maintenance. That's kind of what we put together on our, not necessarily our people, what we put together from all our vendors, what we wanted to purchase. So basically we came down to 3 solutions. We looked at the Cisco solution, the HP solution, and the Juniper solution. Cisco was very expensive, and you'll see on the next page, you'll kind of see the price breakdown for essentially the same equipment and capabilities. I kind of put it as the Cisco is kind of like the Cadillac of switching. They're a very good switch. They've been around, they've been in business. It's kind of the name brand, but you pay for that name brand as well. The HP solution, the solution they provided with us, actually we found this out about a week and a half ago, will not work on the fiber optic cable we have. We had our fiber optic cable tested. It was put in 1997 at those 3 buildings, and it's an old style of fiber optic cable. It's actually a thicker cable, a thinner cable, and will not handle the speeds of that 10 gig speed we need. So we had to do some different solutions with HP, which ended up driving up the price a little bit on the HP solution. And so in the end, Juniper Networks is the kind of the clear choice for us to go with. And they're based on their price and what their switches do, their capabilities. Juniper, you've probably not heard of them much. If you know about computers at all, you might have heard of Cisco. You might buy that in your house for your routers at home, or Linksys. If you've probably heard of HP before, you probably haven't heard of Juniper. Juniper is they're a smaller company. They're not one of the big conglomerate companies, but they run all the tier 1 service companies. Facebook uses them for all their switches. I can't think of the other companies off the top of my head, but the tier 1 AT&T uses Juniper switches. So all the big companies use them because their uptime is very high. They're rated very well.
Okay, I just heard you say something that we can see when we'll be talking about business services not too distant future. The age of the fiber, then it's put in 97, and we're now 2015, and you're just telling me that it can't handle 10 gig.
Well, it can handle 10 gig if the switches on the end are appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the cable, the actual fiber is still up, has the ability to go up.
I would say we've got about 5 to 7 years left. I mean, the next time we do our switching, which will hopefully be 7 to 10 years, we probably will have to install new fiber at that point. If we wanted to go with the HP solution, we would have to install new fiber now. Yeah. Which would not be ultimately difficult, because we can actually pull the fiber that's in existing, connect ends to it and actually pull it through. It's just a matter of time and material to do that, which obviously brings a cost associated with that. So we just don't think we need to do it right now. The fiber will work. It's just that we have to go with these switches instead of the HP solution. Any other questions? So if you look, I kind of broke down the costs here of what all the solutions were and all the dollars and so forth. And I kind of tried to put them in by vendor. It didn't really mean to be by price, but it kind of ended up going a little bit by price. Extreme Networks, you can see, was very, very high on the list of costs. Extreme Networks does all the NFL networking for the NFL. So they kind of came into the game late. But Heartland, we got a quote on them from Cisco Meraki, Capital Data. You can see the cost there. PDS, which is based out of Madison, did a quote for us in HP. CDWG as well did a quote on HP. But you'll see that the CDWG HP quote is low. Probably the lowest up there, but that's not, they didn't make an accurate solution. The solution wouldn't have worked. And we did not pursue them further to fix that, because we kind of knew we weren't going to go with CDWG, just because they don't provide any type of engineering services.
They don't have any support,
No support.
They just sell it.
They just sell it. It's kind of like going to Walmart and buying it there. You don't get any support or any service, like if you go to Best Buy, they have a Geek Spot, you know. Scammer Corner, we do a lot of business with them out of Green Bay, and then the Juniper, CDWG also did a Juniper quote for us. OTG is the Office Technology Group. They're based out of Milwaukee area and Appleton. And then AE Business Solutions is also another company out of Madison. And ultimately, in the end, we looked at the OTG and AE Business Solutions. And you'll notice that the OTG is cheaper, but it's also not the same solution as the AE Business Solution. The AE Business Solution provides for redundancy between our closets, so if anything would happen or if a switch would go down, it would still provide, it would still operate. So if we put that solution into what the OTG proposed to us, it'd actually be a little bit higher price. It'd be like I have 168, 969, so not much higher. So they're pretty much the same price. The only difference is that the AE Business Solution is a more reliable solution. That's why it's a little bit higher. So in the end, we decided to go with that. And really, if you look at the cost of the WRPS after the E-rate, it's only about $2,000 and some change to make that reliability. And we thought that was well worth it in the end. Additionally, AE right now has system engineers available. They can provide support. They can provide engineering support. The Office Technology Group does not have anybody available right now. They're just getting in and selling Juniper switches, so they don't have an engineer or any support, so we'd have to look elsewhere for that. So it'd be nice to be applied for somebody that can provide us support. So any questions there on this? So the final recommendation we have is that we'd like to purchase the Cisco Meraki wireless access points from Capital Data. We'd like to purchase the Juniper switching. The total cost of the project is $214,991.92. If the E-rate funding is approved, and this is the key piece here, the WRPS cost will be about $85,996.77. I have to submit the E-rate stuff tomorrow morning if you approve it. I'll probably submit it either way, just in case. Because if I don't submit it, we can't get any of the funding at all. But I wanted to bring this to you to get your approval to move forward and submit that paperwork to E-rate, and then hopefully get some new infrastructure updates. Any questions?
My usual one, these things come and go, and then you say, oh, that was no good anymore, you have to buy a new one. There's no way out of that, you just have to deal with it.
Yeah, well, we could probably continue to run what we have, but we're going to run into the same problems that we're running into now with bandwidth. Our bandwidth needs aren't going down, they're not going to go away. And more things are connecting to the bandwidth. One of the things you might hear, Ed, probably the next, I would say, near future is our camera system at Lincoln is 10 years old, near 10 years old. I don't know when that was installed.
That's about right.
And that is aging, and the new cameras, the analog camera system there, they don't make it anymore. It's all IP cameras. So you have to plug it into a switch, and you have to have power over Ethernet, and we're out of those. We have to buy more switches to add cameras, and the cameras are starting to fail at Lincoln. So really, this sets us up for should be a long time. We actually built in a 20% growth into these switches. so we have room to grow, so we have room to add access points, we have room to add, if we would decide to go with, why can't I think of it now, Ed, proximity card readers and door strikes at all the doors for staff if they wanted to come in. Those door strikes operate off of power over Ethernet, they operate off of Ethernet cord cable. So we'd have the ability to add, those in without adding more switches.
Did you have any local participation, any vendors?
I would say A&E Business on Madison is probably as local as we have. There's not really anybody local that can do the enterprise size of us.
Sounds like you did a thorough job.
We did a lot, we spent a lot of time on this, a lot of time. To be honest with you, the project started at about $350,000, and we were able to work them down through the vendors and working different switch configurations and everything, and competition among them.
Did you tell them we're almost out of money?
They know, yes. We got them down to 168 and then 46, so that was, I think we did a very good job in that. I don't think we can go much lower. I think we almost got some of these Juniper switches for cost from some of these vendors, so.
Does the balance of the referendum dollars for technology cover the 85,000 plus?
Yeah, I knew somebody was gonna ask that, so I have the balance, the referendum balance. It's,
She just beat me to it, so.
$963,753 was remaining in the referendum balance, so yes, it will. So if we do not get E-rate funded, we will have enough money to cover it. And so, but I'm hoping we do, so.
I was gonna ask the same question. Well, not hearing any further questions, I would make a motion to recommend the two proposals presented tonight. The first one being the Cisco Meraki wireless access points from Capital Data at a cost of $46,594.80. And the second item being the Juniper switching from AE Business Solutions at a cost of $168,397.12. Total project cost projected is $214,991.92. And with the positive E-rate funding that we should hopefully get, the final cost would be $85,996.77 WRPS.
Second motion.
A motion and second to approve the final recommendation given to us. Jack, can you read that back, right?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Could we please have roll call on it?
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Hett?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Penville?
Yes.
Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank all of our departments, curriculum and technology for, 2006 referendum was almost 10 years ago now, a solid 9 years ago, and we still are using those funds very judiciously to pay stuff that would have to come out of budgets, and I know there's been talked to multiple school districts where they usually get their referendum and their money's gone. I mean, it's gone once they get it, so.
Yeah, this is the second set of switches we've been able to do out of the referendum, so money's been spent very wisely. That balance is technology
Just
only.
technology. We have another balance for curriculum, and I can get that information for
No,
you if
but
you'd
I
like
just,
it.
I just find it refreshing that we are able to do things and continue to save literally save the taxpayers' money by being able to still use these funds because we didn't just spend it all at once.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
diligence.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
No problem. Looking for it.
Okay, we can move on to item E, discussion and possible action to approve a proposal to install video intercom equipment in secure entrance areas of district buildings. And that's why Ed's here tonight.
You bet. Just to tag on to what Casey had to say, we are doing a lot right now with the kids' safety and security in mind. We're doing tabletop exercises like she had said. There's a lot that's being done that people don't see. I have been questioned different times, I see Wausau schools put cameras in, one of their buildings. Why don't you have cameras yet? Some things like that. Obviously, I'd like to say we're being a leader in the technology side. When it comes to safety and security, we aren't. We kind of get, we need to get up to speed a little bit, I think. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes that no one sees, like the tabletops, and quite honestly, Casey and David do an awesome job. They come in here. There's some things that come out of those tabletops from building principals that shock me. You know, I mean, it's really good stuff, and it makes us think kind of outside of our normal realm on some things that could happen. We did an active shooter demonstration over at Washington School, and just the sound of gunfire in a building isn't something that you know, even registers with us. And if you look back, a lot of the active shooter incidents that have happened, you know, a teacher will think, oh, it's firecrackers, it's, you know, anything but gunfire. I mean, we kind of put that, you know, out of our mind a little bit, I think, when it comes to schools.
Is that disseminated broadly so that everybody knows what it sounds like?
Yeah, I'll have to say it shocked me, quite honestly, and they're using blanks.
If you don't shoot guns yourself, some
Yeah.
people don't know what that shit
Right,
is like.
and in a building, and I shoot, you know, I'm a hunter, and I'm used to the sound of gunfire and what it sounds like. It sounds different if it was in this room or down the hallway. It's unreal. I mean, it's a sound I hope we never hear. And, you know, these little things that we're doing, like the Alice training, I'm fully behind that. I think the days of locking down, you know, are long gone with, you know, probably with the abacus. There were, you know, in Columbine, there were rooms where kids were shot that had doorways going outside, you know, and same thing with Sandy Hook. You know, some of them, you know, basically they're just sitting targets. And, you know, you're probably not gonna in the next 4 or 5 minutes get a police response. So, you know, it's kind of on us and different things we can do technology-wise and different trainings and just getting people to think that way is part of it. And, you know, that's kind of what brings me to the A-phone. It's our first step. You know, I'm hoping it's just the tip of the iceberg. But basically what these will allow us to do, each one of our buildings right now we have locked down except the main entry door. And that door, you know, is open to the public, and most of our buildings were made to be open to the public. You know, they're public buildings and we welcome people. That thinking has kind of changed. You know, a lot of our main entryways are not visible from the offices. So we have to leave them open for parents to come and go and bring lunch money, things like that. But yet someone with bad intent could come in, sneak in down a hallway undetected until some school personnel saw someone walking around without a visitor badge. So these A-phones, basically it's an audio video intercom that will be at our front doors. You'll have to come up, I think Maureen included a picture of them in the packet. You've probably seen them like at the hospital, different places like that. Basically, you just come up, you hit the button, and a chime will come on. It'll say, you know, state your business. It'll say, you know, I'm John Krings. I'm here to bring my daughter's lunch money. They'll let you into the office then, or they'll send someone down to meet you, you know, if it's someone they don't recognize. At that point, they'll hit a button in the office on their computer. It'll unlock that door. There's an electronic strike on that door. It'll open that door up, and in you'll go, straight to the office. Right now, like I said, there's people that come in our buildings, especially I know just from working at East here, they would come in the East office entrance, walk in looking for the board office, things like that, and wander around the halls until someone snagged them and say, hey, can I help you? And then we'll point them in the right direction. But this will give us the ability to lock down all of our exterior doors and just allow people in that are welcome, basically. And you see I bid this out to 4 different vendors. H&S Security out of Stevens Point, Current Technologies, Permar Security, and Complete Control out of Port Edwards. And Current Technologies was the low bidder on the project. I went and saw their work. They did Port Edwards schools. H&S did Stevens Point schools. Stevens Point's just getting this up and running in a few of their schools now. I'd like to see it in all of our buildings because I think, you know, each building obviously is just as important as the other. And so I'd like to take this to all of our buildings, be able to lock our buildings down, and then you know, hopefully this is the tip of the iceberg. You know, cameras in our buildings, some intrusion alarms, card access. It's unfortunate, but I think it's very necessary.
So what buildings is this for?
We'll have a camera in each building, and then like East here, we'll have 3. One at the main door, one at our handicap entrance on the south end, and then one in the board office entrance. And Lincoln High School will have 3 also. They'll
All
have
the
this.
schools have an office personnel there that will let people in, or?
Well, it's gonna put more on the secretaries. You know, I won't lie to you, it's gonna be another responsibility, and they're already quite busy. But, you know, in the same token, they're busy, so they're not monitoring that front door either, even the ones that are visible.
I think though too, we're gonna have to educate the public. My daughter goes to Washington and I pick her up every day in the afternoon, and there are
Right.
probably 75 or 100 parents there inside the building, inside the entryway, in the cafeteria area. There's a lot of people there to pick up from
Yep.
kindergartners up through 5th grade, and you think, well, if this solution is gonna be implemented, we really shouldn't have parents inside the building.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess that's up for discussion, but if you're gonna be a secure building, those parents should be waiting outside the building for their children to come out. So that's gonna be a huge change for a lot of parents that show up every day, and now I gotta stand outside, and if it's cold or raining, I still
Yep.
stand outside.
and that will be dealt with at the building level. I mean, that's, you know, with these, we can still bar that door open
Sure.
when school starts and when school gets out. So, you know, it's basically that time of the day when everybody's in their classroom, the office staff is busy, you know, with 1,000 different things. Principal may be, you know, anywhere in the building, and, you know, that door is left unsecured. But it will be an adjustment. We put a system somewhat similar to this at River Cities, and it took a while to get the bugs worked out and, you know, get everybody on board with it. But I think it seems to be working pretty well, and I haven't gotten a lot of calls from the public, you know, as far as inconveniencing them. I think everybody, you know, this day and age, they expect to be somewhat inconvenienced in the building.
Well, there is no way, like you said, our buildings are public buildings. There's no way of locking them down.
Right.
You're 100% that somebody with bad intent can't get in.
Yep. I mean, they're designing buildings with security in mind now, school buildings. You know, there were 160 active shooter incidents between year 2000 and 2013. The average age of that shooter was 14 and a half years old. So, I mean, times are changing, you know, it's gone from, you know, fights out in the schoolyard to, you know, locking our buildings down, and Stevens Point even, they're armoring up some of their glass at their entryways. You know, it's unfortunate, it's the time period we're living in.
The best case scenario, you're slowing it down.
Right,
You know,
and that's
you see
exactly.
something, you notify law enforcement, you slow them down long enough, hopefully for law enforcement.
Yep, exactly. Every roadblock that you can put up, you know, from locking your doors, anything you can do to extend that time that someone with bad intent has to come in your building and do harm, it's priceless.
I think one of the most productive is that students know something's going on, they say something to somebody.
Oh, mental health.
Even if
and-
it's, even if they don't know it's totally accurate.
Yep, that's it, mental health and, you know, just someone speaking up is huge. That's the only way to mitigate this stuff, really. You know, it's, if someone has bad intent, they're gonna get into the buildings no matter how much security you put in place. I mean, they will.
In the medical field, 65% of hospital mistakes, somebody knew it was a mistake, but didn't say anything.
But was scared to say something, exactly. This, you know, I hope through this all, people are, you know, empowered enough to say something. If you think something's not right, you know, somebody brings a backpack to class, you know, there's something on social media, you know, hopefully someone will speak up.
Will these locks have the ability to do a card key
No,
transition?
that's,
That's something.
you know, and this is what I've been looking at, that most places keep separate,
Okay.
just so, the A-phone is kind of the gold standard for video intercoms. Paul Peterson was just out to the Pentagon actually here a month or two ago, and they have them on the Pentagon. So, I don't know why they don't incorporate two together, but I guess the A-phone's the gold standard for that, that's what they do and do well. They are coming out with some card readers and things, but that's not their main focus. The main focus is the door locks.
That's not that big of a deal because you probably have to have different.
You'd have to have
electronics
both anyway.
anyhow, so you just use it on a
Yep.
different door.
Any other questions?
Thank you, appreciate it.
No further questions, I make a motion to recommend approval of the proposal to install 8-phone video intercom systems by Current Technology at 16 doors throughout the school district at a cost of $47,000 to be funded by the Building and Grounds Department budget.
Second.
A motion is second to approve the administration's recommendation to install the 8-phone video intercom systems by Current Technologies at 16 doors throughout the district at a cost of $47,000 to be funded by the Building and Grounds Department budget. We have a roll call, Mary, please.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Hett?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayo? Yes.
Thank you, Maureen. Motion carries. Okay, and the last item under new business is consideration and approval of selection for building construction house project for the 15-16 school year.
We had two proposals we were reviewing. One was someone who submitted a prior proposal that we had worked on, and so we opted to go with this proposal.
Anything, John?
We actually had 4 people originally
Two
submitted to it, but
dropped
2 of
out.
them, only 2 of them completed the paperwork. And one of the things I know we like to do since I've been on the committee is that we like to look at actual people that are wanting, sometimes we get spec homes, people that want to build spec homes rather than just a house. So those are nice in the years that we have nobody coming, but we always like to look at and try to build for somebody that's going to actually live in the house. And so that's how we decided this year to pick a house for the Brian and Tricia Svoboda. And they're actually building right behind, is it St. Luke's Church in Kellner?
Yes.
So, if St. Luke's Church there, you start going down the street towards the Kellner Fields, it's the next lot, right behind the church is where they're
St. John.
St. John.
Or St. John's, I'm sorry, St. Luke's is by Shopper, St.
Yeah.
John's.
They're going, whoa.
Yeah. No, their lot is their yard. No, St. John's Church in Kellner. So, if I was on the committee, I'd make a motion that we build the trade homes, approval for the proposal for construction of the house for the 2015-2016 Lincoln High School building construction class for Brian and Tricia Svoboda on a lot located on Park Road in Hampshire County.
I'll second that.
A motion is second to approve the Trade Homes Committee recommendation to approve the construction of the house by the 15-16 Lincoln High School building construction class for Brian and Tricia Svoboda on a lot located on Park Road in Kellner. All
Yes,
those in
actually,
favor?
yes, sorry.
Yeah, could we change it to Kellner, maybe?
Sure.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, if we look at our calendar next Monday, we have a board consortium meeting in Port Edwards. I believe that's at the elementary school library. Have we heard otherwise? Last time that's where it was.
It'll be on the agenda, yes,
Okay.
that's where it's at.
So if members of the public would be interested, it is a public meeting, you're certainly welcome to attend. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.